Hello everyone. Let's start our today's discussion. I hope you all remember that in previous class we had discussion on question number 1 of specimen exam of advanced audit and assurance. In today's class, we will look at a very important document relating to question number 1, which we discussed in previous class. This document is Read the Mind of an AAA Marker. In this document, the examiner has provided us with answer scripts of 2 students, along with the marking guidelines that how their answers were marked by the examiner. Student number 1 got very good marks, whereas student number 2 didn't perform well. We will analyze the answer scripts of both of the students along with the marking guidelines to understand that how the examiner marks the student's answer in examination. We will also look at the answer which we developed in the previous class, and then we will compare it with the examiner's answer and marking scheme. Many students ask this question that, sir, what should be the length of our answer in examination? Should we write like an examiner answer or should we write less? I always say to them that examiner's answer is not written in exam pressure and time limitation. If you will write like a length of an examiner answer, your time management will be missed and you will not be able to complete your examination. Now, in today's class, when we will look at the candidate's answer and when we will analyze the answer script of candidate 1, who got very good marks, you will be able to understand that what should be the length of your answer and how much detailing should be done. Okay? So now let's look at this document. We will review the question number 1 and then we will start analyzing both of the answer scripts. Okay. Now, when we look at this document, some introduction detail is given. I will attach this document on the learning management system so you can download it and you can analyze it on your own also. See, this document is very important. It is not issued for all the exam papers. It is only issued for this specimen paper. So you have to make sure that you gain maximum benefit of it. Okay. Now this is the candidate 1 answer. Okay. The font is a bit small. I will try and zoom maximum. But since we have to read the comments of the examiner also, like the student has prepared the format of briefing notes, the examiner has given note 1, note 2. When we will drag our pointer on it, the marking and the comments will be given. Okay, so we will analyze the entire answer of this candidate 1. Okay, so this is the entire answer of candidate 1. Now, if we just go down, I'm just going through the document first and then we'll go in detail. Now the candidate 1 got 40 marks out of 50 marks in question number 1, which is a very good score. Okay, at AAA level, 40 out of 50 marks is a very good score. It means that candidate 1 got 80% of the marks. And then there is answer script of candidate 2. Again, along with the answer script, the marking guidelines are given. When we will drag our pointer on the points, we will get the marking guidelines. Okay, and then we'll analyze them. Now, candidate number 2 got how many marks? Just look at it. Go down. Okay. Candidate number 2 got only 18.5 marks out of 50, which is obviously not a good score. This means that candidate 2 was not a successful candidate. Okay. So now we will analyze the answers of both of the candidates. We will look at the marking guidelines. We will look at the answer which we developed in the previous class. I hope you all remember. Anyone who has not taken the previous class should take the recording of the previous class first, okay, so that you can understand the entire question in detail. And then we will look at the examiner answer also, okay, the examiner answer document. And we will also look at the marking scheme, that how the examiner marks the answer. Okay, so this entire class will be a very beneficial class, and it will give you an insight that how you have to develop your answers. Okay, and as I said earlier, this document of Read the Mind of Marker is not issued for all the exam papers. So you have to make sure that you gain maximum benefit of this document. Okay, you have to make sure that you understand this document, you understand the examiner's guideline so that you can apply them while you are developing your own answers. Okay, now first of all, we are doing a fast review of the question so that when we discuss the points, we have references of the question. But we'll read the question in a fast review, considering that we have already spent a 3 hours class on this question, which was the previous class in which we analyzed this entire question and we developed its answer. So in today's class, we'll just do a fast review and then we'll refer candidate 1 answer, candidate 2 answer, the answer which we developed, the examiner answer, the marking scheme, and then we will conclude our things that how we have to develop the answers in the examination. I want you all to listen to me with patience and concentration. Okay, since the class is a pre-recorded class, so whenever you feel that you are tired, you can pause the class, get up refreshed, and then come back again. Okay, but make sure that you attend the complete class with complete concentration. Okay, let's review the question first. It is 1st July 2005. You are the manager in the audit department of Pegasus and Company, a firm of chartered certified accountants. You are assigned to the audit of the Crux Group, which has a financial year ending 30th September 2005 and is a listed entity. So this is an introduction information about the question that we work in Pegasus and Company. The client is Crux Group and the year end is 30th September 2005. Now, Pegasus and Company was appointed auditor to the group in January 2005. Now, this means that this is first year of audit because the year end is 30th September 2005 and we were appointed during the year in month of January. So this will be our first year of audit. And as you all know, this question is related to audit risk. We have already analyzed this question. So first year of audit is an audit risk which we refer. The group operates in the travel industry, offering a selection of worldwide itineraries and has a fleet of 20 cruise ships. The group operates 3 brands which provide different type of cruise experiences. The following exhibits are available on the left-hand side of the screen provide information relevant to the question. Partners email, an email which you have received from Norma Star, the group audit engagement partner. Background information, information and matters relevant to audit planning, selected financial information extracted from the group accounts, and audit team meeting notes, extract from the meeting notes taken at a recent audit team meeting. The information should be used to answer the question requirements within your chosen response options. So an introduction is given about the question that we are working in Pegasus and Company. The client is Crux Group. The year end is 30th September 2005. We are appointed as auditor during the year in month of January. And then the list of exhibits is provided to us. Let's look at exhibit number 1, which is partners email. Okay. Again, we are doing a fast review of the question so that we can identify the data when we are referring the responses of both of the candidates. To audit manager from Norma Star Audit Engagement Partner, subject audit planning for the Crux Group, date is 1st July 2005. You use this information to prepare the format of briefing notes. As it is question number 1, so there will be 4 marks relating to communication skill. These 4 marks will be included in 10 professional skill marks. In question number 1, 40 marks are relating to auditing and 10 marks are relating to professional skills. In 10 professional skill marks, 4 marks maximum can be allocated to communication skill. Hello, I have provided you with some information which you should use to help you with planning the audit of our new client, the Crux Group, for the financial year ending 30th September 2005. So it is highlighted again that it is our new client. Based on the analysis I have done on this industry, it is appropriate for overall materiality to be based on profitability of the group, as this is the key focus for investors and providers of finance. I require you to prepare briefing notes for my use, in which you, Part A, using the information in all exhibits, evaluate and prioritize the significant audit risk to be considered in planning the group audit. Note, you are not required to consider audit risk relating to foreign exchange transactions and balances, as this will be planned separately. 25 marks required. So in part A, we have to talk on audit risk, we have to discuss the significant audit risk, and we have to prioritize them. It is very important that we look at the instructions of the examiner carefully. He has clearly stated that we are not required to consider audit risk relating to foreign exchange. So the student must ignore it. Okay? If you will not follow the instructions of the examiner, then you will lose marks in communication skill. Then part B, describe the principal audit procedures to be performed on segmental information relating to group revenue, 5 marks. And then, using the information in Exhibit 4, evaluate the matters to be considered in deciding whether Pegasus and Company should accept the engagement to provide advice on the group's social and environmental information. 10 marks. So 25 marks for audit risk, 5 marks for audit procedures, and then 10 marks for evaluating that whether we should accept the engagement or not. So we have read the introduction, and then we have read the partner's email, which give us the guidance that what we have to do in this question. Then there is background information. Let's look at it. We will first analyze the complete question. The reason being that when we will be reading the candidate answers, they will not be in sequence of the question, because they will be in prioritization sequence. Okay? You all know that we also prioritized our answer once we completed the audit risk. So when we will look at the candidate one answer, it will also be in prioritization sequence. Like revenue recognition will be written and other risk will be written first, which we haven't read in the questions sequence yet. So first we will analyze the entire question so that when we are reading the candidate answer, we can relate the entire data. Group operations. The group operates cruises under 3 brands which offer passengers a variety of cruise itineraries with a wide choice of destinations. Cruise typically last for 2 weeks, though some last up to 6 weeks. If you remember, this information was very useful when we were developing a risk on revenue recognition policy, because they were recognizing their entire revenue together. So we highlighted this point in the previous class that when the cruise ship goes up till 6 weeks, the recognition of revenue shouldn't be done all together. We'll read about the revenue recognition policy when we look at selected financial information extra. Again, I'll say it again. We have already read this complete question, analyzed it, developed its answer in the previous class. So if anyone has missed the previous class, make sure that you attend that session first. Now, the brands are internally generated and therefore are not recognized as intangible asset within the group financial statements. Information about the 3 brands operated by the group is as follows. Sunseeker Cruises. Cruises which visit the beach destinations in the Caribbean, Europe, and North America. Explorer Cruises, cruises which focus on visiting cities and landmarks around the world. And then there are Pioneer Cruises, cruises which take in areas of natural beauty, including the Antarctic and Alaska. So there are 3 segments of the business, and these are 3 separate brands: Sunseeker Cruises, Explorer Cruises, and Pioneer Cruises. Now, business developments in the year. Sunseeker Cruises. In this financial year, the group will spend $75 million on upgrading and maintenance of the Sunseeker cruise ships. If you remember, we identified an audit risk here that there needs to be a demarcation between capital expenditure and revenue expenditure because $75 million is spent on upgradation and maintenance. Upgradation outflows can be capitalized. Maintenance outflows have to be expensed out. These luxury ships have to adhere to a very high standard, so the group regularly incurs high expenditure on their maintenance. Maintenance has to be expensed out. For which several ships have enhanced by the installation of new entertainment facilities, including cinemas and gyms. Equipments in the gym, which need to be replaced on average every 3 years. So we identified an audit risk here also that the gym equipments have to be depreciated on 3 years because their useful life is 3 years because they need to be replaced after every 3 years period. So we identified a point on depreciation of the assets. Explorer cruises. The Explorer cruise ships, while still luxurious, are the oldest ships in the fleet. And the group is gradually replacing these with new ships. During the financial year, 2 new ships with a total cost of $110 million will come into use. The ship took 3 years to build and were constructed by Vala Shipbuilder Company, a company which is not owned by the group. However, the chairman of the group, Max Draco, is also the chairman of Vala Shipbuilder Company. So if you remember, there is a risk related to related party. Our chairman, our key management personnel is also serving at Vala Shipbuilder Company with whom we have done a transaction during the year. And his son is the company's chief executive officer. This also creates a risk of related party that the close family member of key management personnel is serving at Vala Shipbuilder Company with whom we did a transaction. So there need to be a disclosure relating to related party. The purchase of this ship was financed through a $110 million loan with a fixed rate of interest of 6% per annum. A further 3 ships are currently under construction by Vala Shipbuilder Company. The group has taken out a loan of $180 million with a 6.5% fixed interest rate to finance this capital expenditure. So again, there is an audit risk relating to borrowing cost. They are funding their capital expenditure through loans. So as per IS 23, borrowing cost, if the project is a qualifying project, it takes more than 12 months. If it is a qualifying project, it takes more than 12 months in construction. We have to capitalize the borrowing cost if the borrowing cost is relating to the construction of that asset, like in this case. So we identified a risk that there is a concern that maybe the borrowing cost is not capitalized. We have drafted all of these points in the previous class when we were developing the answer. If you remember, the capitalization of borrowing cost, related party transaction, and then spending on Sunseeker cruises. We have discussed this answer in detail. We drafted this entire answer in the previous class. The today's class objective is to look at the answer of candidate 1 and 2 so that we can analyze that how the examiner marks us in the examination and how the candidate 1 got so good marks in the examination. And then what were the mistakes of candidate 2 also, which we should avoid. Then pioneer cruises. These cruises are for more adventurous travelers and are growing in popularity. In order to visit certain destinations on these specialist cruises, the group has to acquire operating licenses from local governments. The cost of license acquisition is capitalized as an intangible asset. It's okay. It's the right treatment. Okay, let's read further. Now there is selected financial information. Let's look at it. Now, Crux Group extracts from the management accounts projected to 30th September 2005, which is the current year, and actual of 2004, which is the previous year. The revenue has increased from 670 million to 764 million. Then operating profit has increased from 101 to 145. Profit before tax increased from 65 to 81. Total assets, if you remember, we calculate the trends from this data, because for every trend we calculate, we get 0.5 marks. Okay. Then included in intangible asset, operating license, property, plant, and equipment. Let's read the notes. Revenue includes passenger ticket sales, which accounts for approximately 85% of the revenue. When customer books a cruise, they are required to pay a refundable 20% deposit, which is initially recognized as deferred revenue. Okay, this is correct. The balance 80% is paid at least 6 weeks before the cruise commences, and at that point also it is recognized as deferred revenue. This is also correct because the service has not yet been provided. The full amount of the ticket price is transferred to revenue when the cruise starts, irrespective of the duration of the cruise. See, this is wrong. This is wrong. We have to spread the revenue over the duration of the trip, not recognize it immediately. Just use your mind. Some of the trips may not be completed at the year end because trips take between 2 weeks to 6 weeks. 6 weeks means 1.5 months. So there may be some trips which are not completed at the year end. And if you are recording their full amount of ticket price as a revenue, then this will be wrong. As per IFRS 15, you have to recognize the revenue according to the level of service which you have provided. You cannot recognize the entire revenue together. If you remember, we wrote an audit risk relating to it. And this is a real concern, and it is a significant issue because revenue recognition will affect the entire financial statement because you are following a wrong policy. It is not about one transaction. It is about a wrong policy which will affect many transactions relating to revenue. That the revenue should be recognized according to the duration of the trip, according to the service which we provide, rather than recognizing the entire revenue together. Like if you take an example, I'm teaching you a course, you pay me a fees. I cannot recognize the entire revenue at start of course. I will recognize the revenue over the period in which I give you service. Okay. The remaining 15% of the revenue is derived from on-board sale of food, drinks, entertainment, and other items to passengers. So we highlighted a risk that when it is generating the 15% of revenue, we have to think about operating segments IFRS 8. That whether on-board sales is being reported as a separate segment or not. Because it should be reported as a separate segment when it is 15% of the revenue. As per IFRS 8, the reporting threshold is 10% of revenue, 10% of profits, or 10% of assets. Anyone has to be satisfied. Management monitors this revenue stream closely as it achieves a high gross margin, and staff are encouraged to maximize these sales to customers. Now, management is monitoring this revenue stream, which means that there must be a chief operating officer on it. Now, see, it is very important that you are good on accounting standards. In IFRS 8, there are 3 portions. Number 1, what is a segment? Number 2, what is a reportable segment? And number 3, what is the disclosure required? What is a segment? Which has a separate financial data available and which has a chief operating officer. So this becomes a segment. What is a reportable segment? Which means 10% of revenue or 10% of profits or 10% of assets. And the disclosure that we have to report its revenue, profits, and assets separately. We have to prepare a complete disclosure note on it. Okay, now let's read further. Revenue is presented on segmental basis in notes to the financial statement. with segments based on 3 brands of the group. Sunseeker Cruises, now they are presenting 3 segments: Sunseeker Revenue, Explorer Cruises, and Pioneer Cruises. They are not presenting onboard sales as a separate segment. They are making segments according to their 3 brands. Okay, there is an issue that onboard sales should also be a separate reportable segment. Ticket price and onboard should be a separate segment, and then there should be further segmentation about Sunseeker, Explorer, and Pioneer. The revenue data is given. Sunseeker is showing an increase, Explorer Cruises is showing a decline, and Pioneer Cruises is showing an increase. We will make a good trend analysis on this. Okay, and if you remember, we made it in the previous class also. We made a proper trend analysis according to this financial data. The increase in revenue, profit, PBT, segmental data, and we made commentary. See, these trends are cash marks because you get 0.5 mark for each calculation. So 0.5, 0.5, 0.5, these 6 ratios gave us 3 marks. And maximum 3 marks you can get for calculation. Okay, if you calculate any margin which is for both years, like if you calculate margin for current year and margin for previous year, then you will get 1 mark because that will make it 2 calculations. See, trend is a single calculation, but when you calculate margin or when you calculate return on capital employed or gearing, which is related to current year and previous year both, then you are making 2 calculations. So you will get 1 mark. For every calculation, you get 0.5 mark. Note 2. Let's come back. Operating licenses are required for the Pioneer cruise ships to visit certain destinations. Licenses are amortized over the specific period to which each license relates. Then there is note 3 about property, plant, and equipment. Ships in use, they have increased. Ships under construction, 62 to 83. Other property, plant, and equipment, accumulated depreciation, and carrying amount. Okay. Now let's look at the last exhibit and then we'll start looking at the answers. Okay, I want you all to concentrate on it. A meeting took place yesterday in which the audit engagement partner discussed several issues. Recent developments affecting Pioneer Cruises. Last week, the government of several countries, which form a major part of Pioneer Cruise itineraries, withdrew their operating license with immediate effect. See, this is a concern for impairment. If the government is withdrawing the license, it will create a concern for impairment of license. And not only impairment of license, it will also lead to impairment of the ships and assets which are used in that segment. Because when the licenses will be withdrawn, those assets will not be able to generate the value in use. So there is a risk of impairment. Because the licenses are getting withdrawn. The government has stated that this is likely to be a temporary measure being put in place to limit the number of tourists visiting the areas of natural beauty. But they will not confirm when the group can resume operations in these countries. So currently, this is a temporary ban, but we don't know that by what time it will be removed. So it is an indicator of impairment of license and Pioneer Cruise assets. Then there is a cybersecurity attack. Last month, the group suffered a cybersecurity attack in which the personal information of 1,400 customers, including their credit card details, was stolen. Again, this is a big concern. Those customers will not transact with us in future. This will create a reputational issue. And then it can lead to impairment of assets because our revenues will fall. And it can also lead to going concern risk. And you can also think about IS 37, that it can lead to penalties. According to the representative of the group audit committee, the group's internal audit team had not properly assessed the risk relating to cybersecurity, which is a requirement of recently introduced data protection legislation. This shows weak controls and control risk also, that their internal audit team is not doing work well. And the audit committee was also not alert when they were not doing well work. Because when internal audit team was not working well, the group audit committee didn't identify it earlier. They identified it when this incident has happened. The internal auditors are also not working well, and audit committee is also not working well. Okay, so this is a control risk. In the jurisdiction in which group operates, the issue which led to cybersecurity attack has now been resolved. But what about the 1400 customer data which has been stolen? What about the breach of the legislation which has happened? And then it also creates a risk on the controls of the company because the internal auditors are not alert and they are not doing good risk assessment. And the group audit committee is not detecting the issues when they should have been. Then, social and environmental information. The group audit committee has inquired whether Pegasus and company can provide an additional service to management on how to measure certain social and environmental information, which is to be published on the group's website and is required by new regulations in the industry and is required to be submitted to regulatory authority. The social and environmental information relates to matters such as water efficiency, energy consumption, charitable donations, and initiatives which support diversity in the workplace. In recognition that this work is quite urgent, the deadline for submission to the regulatory authority falls within next month. The Group Audit Committee has stated that it is willing to pay an enhanced fees for this service. Now, this paragraph relates to Part C, in which we have to discuss about the matters we have to consider about accepting disengagement. Okay. And then there is requirement exhibit, which simply says that we have to respond to the partner's instruction. 40 marks, if you remember, 25 marks for audit risk, 5 marks relating to audit procedures, and 10 marks relating to matters to consider before accepting the engagement of social and environmental audit. And then 10 marks for professional skills, communication, analysis and evaluation, professional skepticism and judgment, and commercial ethics. See, these professional skill marks are not a separate requirement. You just have to attempt your 40 auditing marks in a professional manner to get these 10 additional marks. Okay. Now, we have developed this entire answer in the previous class. In today's class, what we are doing is that we will first look at the responses of both of the candidates which are provided in this document of Read the Mind of Mark. We will analyze the answer. We'll look at the examiner comments. Then we'll analyze the answer which we develop. We'll look at the examiner's answer document, if you remember. And then we will look at the marking scheme which is provided along with the examiners. So it will be a detailed activity. We have already read the question. We know all the data. It is in our mind. And now we will start reading this answer. Okay. Okay, so candidate 1 has started the answer with a format of a briefing note, which is obviously very important when we are answering question number 1. Now, to Norma Star Audit Engagement Partner from Audit Manager, subject audit planning for the Crux Group, date 1st July 2005. Now, for the format of briefing notes, I have told you people that it's a very simple technique. What you have to do is that you simply go to the partner's email, you copy paste this entire bracket, and you just switch to and from. Like this, to audit manager will become from audit manager, and from Norma Star will become to Norma Star because we are replying. Okay, so the format of the briefing note is made to, from, subject, and date, and then an introduction is given. These briefing notes have been prepared to help in planning the audit of our new client, the Crux Group, for the financial year ending 30th September 2005. In first part, I have evaluated the audit risk to be considered in planning the group audit. Secondly, the notes contain principal audit procedures to be performed on segmental information relating to group revenue. Next part evaluates the matters to be considered in deciding whether Pegasus and company should accept the engagement to provide advice on the group's social and environmental information. Now, this last line is irrelevant because this question was originally a past paper, and it is now being asked in the exam. So it is not relevant. It is irrelevant. 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 It is irrelevant And in that past paper, there was also a requirement relating to data analytics article. Okay. But since now the question has been shifted from a 50 marks requirement to a 40 marks requirement, that's why the examiner has removed this requirement. The notes end with description, information describing how the use of data analytics can bring benefits to the audit of Crux Group. The examiner has removed this requirement because he converted the auditing marks from 50 to 40. Okay, so this one line is irrelevant. Okay, let's see that how this briefing note part has been marked. If you look at comment number 1, which is for to, from, subject and date, 1 mark awarded for communication, style, language and clarity, presentation of materiality and relevant calculations are easy to follow and understand. So the format that he made, to, from, subject, date, introduction, and then he started with materiality. So he got 1 mark for communication and 1 mark awarded for effectiveness and clarity of communication. So the format of the briefing notes, and then the sequence that he moved towards materiality while writing audits. Point number 3, 1 mark awarded for communication for the briefing notes format and structure. So if you look at it, few easy marks, just the format of briefing notes and an introduction. You got 2 marks relating to it. 1 mark for effectiveness and clarity of communication and 1 mark for the format and structure of briefing notes. Okay, then this materiality thing obviously will come at the later part of the answer when we start with audits. If you remember, we developed this in the previous class that you have to write that to whom it is addressed, to, from, subject, date, and then you write an introduction, the name of the group, the year end, and refer each of the requirement in a brief manner. And this is what the candidate 1 has done. I believe that this is not difficult. Then he started with part A, audit risk, materiality. If you remember, the partner has instructed us to use profitability as a benchmark of materiality. The partner has instructed us to use profitability as a benchmark of materiality. So let's look at it. Materiality is based on profit before tax of the group. This is calculated as follows. 5% to 10% of PBT, which will be $4.05 million to $8.1 million. As this is a new client, the detection risk is increased due to our lack of understanding of this particular business and brought forward balances, the lower range of 4.05 million is chosen as a suitable materiality. See a very easy and a brief comment on materiality. Okay, now materiality is based on profit before tax. You followed the instructions of the examiner. Note number 5. 1 mark awarded for communication. The candidate has adhered. Adhered means complied to the specific request made by the audit engagement partner, basing materiality on PBT. 2 marks awarded for correct ratio and calculation of the upper and lower range of materiality. 4.05 million and $8.1 million. You calculated the materiality, you got 2 marks. And 1 mark awarded for justification of the choosing basis for materiality. Okay, that you selected the justified materiality level, the lower level based on the risk of the group. So if you look at it, just look at it, it is such a brief point. Very specific, very concise. Okay, if you remember, we also developed this point that materiality level for the Crux Group audit will range between 5% to 10% of its profit before tax. It will be between 4.05 million to 8.1 million. It will be on auditor's judgment to determine materiality level from this range. As Crux Groups is a new audit line of biggest company, therefore detection risk will be high. Considering higher audit risk, materiality level will be capped at lower value, which will be 4.05. Even our point was more detailed than the one he wrote, but then also he got complete marks. Okay, now just let me guide you something. If you look at the examiner answer, just look at how much he is writing on material. For the purpose of these briefing notes, the following overall materiality level will be used to assess the significance of identified risk, and as requested, it will be based on profitability of the group. Benchmark using profit before tax or operating profit as suggested benchmark provides the following range. So if you just look at it, he writes so much. He writes so much, but writing that much is not required. Just look at the answer of the candidate one who got complete marks on materiality on just one half one line, half second line, and this 1.5 line, which means almost 2.5 lines. On this 2.5 line, he got 1 mark, comment number 4. He got 2 marks, comment number 5. He got 1 mark, comment number 6. So this means 4 marks on 2.5 line. See, it is not important to write too much to get marks. It is important that you follow the examiner instructions, you give proper judgments, you give proper explanation, and you'll be getting marks in the examination. Are you getting it? Okay, so like the examiner, that if you comment on operating profit and then on the PBT and then making a comment that these benchmarks are only a starting point for determining materiality and professional judgment will need to be applied in determining final level to be used in course of audit, as this is a new client and therefore initial engagement due to increased detection risk, materiality should be set at the lower level range of 4.05 million, which he has rounded off to $4 million. So what you need to understand is that examiner writes a lot of data, which is just extra. Okay, he explains in detail because he's not writing in exam pressure. He is not writing in time limitation. But when you will be attempting the exam, you will have a clock ticking on. Okay, you will have the time which will be losing. So you have to make sure that you have to write in a limited manner. If you will write excess, then you will not be able to complete your examination. Now let's look at the first risk, new client, and the first year of audit, risk of detection. The crux group is a new client. We have to understand the entity, its environment, its controls. We do not have experience with this client, and we may not recognize all risk of material misstatement. We did not audit the opening balance. The client is listed, which means that the risk, if wrong opinion is issued, is higher. He just wrote 2 lines. Believe me, this risk is good, but there was only one limitation in what he wrote. He identified that client is listed, which means the risk, if wrong opinion is issued, is higher. He didn't explain it, that in case of listed entity, greater regulations are applicable. In case of listed entity, there are greater stakeholders involved. So risk of penalties is higher. So he just didn't explain this issue of listed entity. But still, let's see how many marks he got. Note number 7. 1 mark awarded for explaining the issue of new client and why this is the case. Point number 8. 0 marks. The candidate has stated to explain, however, they have not explained why the risk would be greater, such as greater laws and regulation and high number of stakeholders. But still, if you look at it, in just less than 2 lines, he got 1 mark out of 2 marks. Because this new client risk was of 2 marks. He still got 1 mark. His marks were loose because he didn't explain the reason of that listed entity risk. Okay. Now, if you look at the risk which we developed, Pegasus company will audit the crux group for the first time in the year ended 30th September 2000. It will increase detection risk, as in first year of audit, Pegasus company will lack understanding about the crux group business and environment. It will affect auditors' ability to identify audit issues. In order to reduce detection risk, Pegasus company should perform detailed audit planning and spend greater time on the audit of the crux. So we explained it in detail. We also defined the response which should be given to the risk. Okay. Further, audit risk will also be higher in relation to opening balances. As Pegasus company will be auditing the crux group for first time in year ended 30th September 2005, therefore, opening balances were not audited by our firm. Our firm should plan audit procedures relating to opening balances as per auditing standards to deal with this risk. So if you look at it, we identified the risk, we explained it in detail. Now, his risk also got 1 mark But his 1 mark was lost because his explanation was insufficient. He didn't explain the point of opening balance. Okay. And he also didn't explain the issue of listed entity. Okay. Are you getting it? Then if you look at the risk of revenue recognition, applicable standard of reporting, which describe how revenue should be recognized. See, he didn't refer IFRS 50. He just referred applicable standard. Okay, so it is not necessary to give the references of all the standard numbers. If you remember, you give it. If you don't remember, just leave it. There is no issue. Should be recognized, recognizes 5 steps revenue. One of the most important things is to find out of the revenue should be recognized over the time or point in time. In case of goods, when we give the goods immediately, we recognize revenue point in time, means immediately. Over the time means to spread. Revenue should be recognized over the time when, among other conditions, the customer consumes the goods service at the same time when it is performed by the entity. So it is explained that how we have to recognize the revenue. Now, cruises typically last for 2 weeks, though some last up to 6 weeks. This could be understood that the consumer gets the service over time, not at point in time, simultaneously when the group is performing the service. However, the note 1 says that full amount of the revenue, that full amount of the ticket price is transferred to revenue when the cruise starts, irrespective of the duration of the cruise. As revenue is a material balance both by nature and by quantity, plus it is an area of management judgment and application of accounting standard correctly, this is a material balance to auditor judgment. There is a risk that revenue is overstated and deferred revenue is understated. So he explained the relevant standard. He applied it to the scenario that how they should spread the revenue. And then he commented on the heads effect. How many marks he got? 0.9. 9 point. 2 marks awarded for identification of the correct financial reporting treatment and implication on the financial statement relating to the same. Candidate then goes on to explain that this is a material balance and increased risk due to subjectivity in applying the standard. So 2 marks were given for explaining the standard well, relating it to the scenario. Note 10. 1 mark awarded for professional skepticism and judgment. The candidate has effectively challenged the information supply and technique carried out because he questioned that what the management is doing is wrong, that they are transferring the entire revenue together, so that is a wrong thing. Note 11. 1 mark awarded for professional skepticism and judgment, materiality being consistently applied throughout. There are other references throughout, and this is consistent usage throughout the candidate's answer. So the materiality level, which he calculated 4.05 million, he referred that this is a material balance to the auditing unit. And then note 12, he explained the impact on the financial statement, that what heads will be affected. So just look at it. 2 marks, these are technical marks, and this 1 mark, this is also a technical mark. So 3 marks relating to accounting standard, and then 2 marks given for professional skills. See, he just wrote this much. Correct treatment, comment on the management, head affected, and materiality. He wrote the correct treatment. He discussed that what the management is doing is wrong. He applied it to the scenario. Okay, he referred that it is a material balance, considering that amount of revenue is also very high, and it is obviously an issue relating to the policy of revenue, which is a significant matter. And then he referred heads affected. Now, if you look at the answer which we developed, the Crux Group should recognize revenue of ticket sales according to trip completion. As per IFRS, revenue for services should be recognized according to completion of service. The deposit amount received by the Crux Group is recognized as deferred revenue. It is correct because at that time, service of trip has not yet started. Similarly, management is doing correct treatment with receipt of the balance of 80%. That is also recorded as deferred revenue because at that time also the trip has not yet started. However, management is recognizing entire revenue and start of cruise. This is a wrong trade, as revenue should spread over duration of the cruise trip. Some revenue recognized at year-end may relate to cruise trips which are not yet complete. This will overstate revenue and understate deferred revenue liability, as duration of trip is still incomplete, and that will represent unearned revenue. Most trips of the Crux Group can range from 2 weeks to 6 weeks. The risk relating to cutoff of revenue need to be evaluated by auditor, specifically in audit plan. Revenue is significant hit for the financial statement, and wrong revenue recognition policy will be considered as material and significant to financial statement. If you just read the point which we develop, and then you compare it with the point which candidate one developed, on which he got 100% marks. He got total 3 marks for this risk, which was 100% for this. For one accounting risk, you can get 3 marks, that is maximum. That is 100% marks. He got 100% marks for writing this. Our point was much more detailed as compared to him. Sir, will we get 4 marks? No, no, no. We'll also get 3 marks in technical and then professional skill marks. What you need to understand is, it is not like that you have to write too much to get the complete marks. Okay? Now look at the examiner answer. How much he is writing on revenue recognition. Okay? Just look at the detail of the point which he is writing and the language and the technicality which he refers. An audit risk arises in relation to the timing of revenue recognition. Given the requirement of ISA 240, the auditor responsibility relating to fraud in auditing financial statement, that when assessing audit risk, the auditor should presume that there are risks of fraud in relation to revenue recognition. So is it necessary that we also give the references of auditing standard numbers? No. See, candidate one didn't give that reference, and that is not required. Okay? This could be a significant area of concern. It is appropriate that customer deposits are recognized as deferred revenue when they are received. This is in line with IFRS 15. Okay, from contracts, revenue from contracts with customers which require that revenue is recognized when performance obligation is satisfied, and therefore any amount paid to the group by customer before a cruise begins are not revenue and should be deferred. So he's going in a lot of detail. He's using technical wordings. He's giving references of accounting standard numbers. But what you need to understand is this much all is not required. This all is not required. If you remember, you write, it's good. But if you look at candidate one answer, you have to be very precise and very specific in your answer. Okay? The most important thing which you have to follow always is not the examiner answer. This is the marking scheme which you have to follow. That up to 3 marks for each audit risk, unless indicated otherwise. Marks may be awarded for other relevant audit risks not included in the guide. If you have any justified risk, you will get mark for that. In addition, half mark for relevant trends or calculation which form part of evaluation of audit risk. Maximum is 3 marks. Appropriate materiality calculation and justified materiality level will get maximum 2 marks. New audit client 2 marks. Revenue recognition, it's a 3 marks risk. Because unless indicated otherwise, all the risks are of 3 marks. So if you look at it, your point is in the marking scheme. You explain it well, you'll simply get a mark. Okay? I hope that you people are understanding the approach which you have to follow in your examination. Okay? Now let's read further what he is writing more. Now if we drag down, okay, it will be very good if you print out this document, because when I am opening it on the screen, the font size is very small because we have to read the comments also in parallel. So if you print out the document and you read it along, it will be very easy for you. No. Cost of upgrading and maintenance of Sunseeker cruise ships. The group will spend $75 million on upgrading and maintenance of Sunseeker group ships. This amount is material to the financial statement. Very well. Okay. Applicable financial reporting standard require that cost of maintenance of property, plant, and equipment, in this case of ships, should be expensed out to profit and loss, while the upgradation ships through installation of new entertainment facility, including cinema and gym, should be capitalized and increase the value of property, plant, and very well. He's applied it very well. He has explained the relevant rule. Okay, the note 13 is, note 13. 1 mark awarded for the explanation of correct accounting treatment and reference to the scenario. Okay, there is a risk that the expenditure of $75 million, which is financial statement, was wrongly categorized, maintenance and upgradation. And as a result, the property, plant and equipment could be overstated and profits overstated if some which should be capitalized were expensed, then property, plant and equipment may be understated and profits are understated. See, is simply referring that if he has done capitalization, if he has done wrong capitalization, then assets will be overstated and profits will also be overstated because you are not recording the maintenance expenditure. Okay, and then he commented that if some are expensed out, then assets and expenses, assets and profits both will be understated. Use your mind. If you have done wrong capitalization, assets will be overstated and profit will also be overstated because you didn't record maintenance expense. If you have wrongly expensed out the things, then profits and assets both will be understated. So if you read it, here the candidate is showing regular application of materiality throughout the response. That was already marked. The materiality mark has already been done. Half mark awarded for the identification of the risk. There has been no reference to the scenario and so only half mark is awarded. Like when he's saying that maintenance and upgradation. So he should refer that which, he should have stated that if the cinema cost is expensed out, if he would have related it better, he would have got additional half. 1 mark for explaining the implication of financial implication of the risk. Now just look at the technical marks. 1 mark for the correct treatment, half mark for the identification of the risk, and 1 mark for applied. Out of 3 marks, you got 2.5 marks. Out of 3, if you get 2.5 at AAA level, just writing this much, believe me, this is a win-win. Okay. So if you look at our answer, we also wrote the point on spending on Sunseeker cruises, that they should divide the spending between upgradation and maintenance, between capital expenditure head and revenue expenditure head. The Crux Group should capitalize its spending done on upgradation in head of property, plant and equipment. Then we gave the reference of the scenario that upgradation outflows include installation of new entertainment facilities, including cinemas and gyms. So we referred to it. However, spending done on maintenance should be expensed out as a revenue expenditure. If the Crux Group management will not divide its outflows between capital and revenue expenditure, then it will misstate property, plant, and equipment. If maintenance outflows are wrongly capitalized, see, we made it specific. We related it to the scenario that okay, if the maintenance runs are capital, then it will overstate profits and assets. Of the Crux Group, spending of $75 million is material to the financial statement. So if you look at it, at the candidate 1 answer, you don't have to write too much to get good marks. Just have to write relevant and you have to make sure that you explain it well. Now, if you look at it, upgradation and maintenance cost, which is done on Sunseeker cruises, this holds 3 marks, okay, since it is an accounting standard risk. Up to 3 marks for each risk, upgradation and maintenance. Okay, let's read further. Now, then he moved towards capital expenditure of new Explorer cruises, work in progress and borrowing cost. Okay, he didn't refer the risk relating to depreciation. He moved towards capital expenditure. He wrote the useful life of equipment in gym later on. Okay, because it is about prioritizing the risk. During this financial year, 2 new ships with a total cost of $110 million will come into use. The value of these 2 new ships is material to financial statement. The interest cost of the loan, which was taken to finance the purchase for the current year, amount to $6.6 million, and this is also material to the financial statement. New assets should be recognized as property, plant, and equipment, and the old ships will be replaced, should be de-recognized. Applicable financial reporting standards require that cost of borrowing, in this case, the interest of the loan, should be capitalized and added to the value of constructed assets. From the moment the decision about the purchase has been taken and first expenditure was made till the asset becomes ready to use. So he's explaining the IS 23. As it is projected that during the year two new ships with a total cost of $110 million will come into use, the ship should increase by more than $93 million. So he's saying that reported in the financial statement is a very less increase. It should have increased by a greater value. Because if you look at the financial statement, the machines have increased, ships in use have increased from 2010 to 2041. Now he's arguing that since $110 million, new ships are installed, they are brought into use. So the increase should be greater. Okay. And then if you look at it, there is a risk that property, plant, and equipment is understated and profits are understated if the value of new ships was expensed out to the P&L. There is a risk that interest on loan was expensed out to the P&L rather than added to the value of the ship. In this case, the profit will be understated and assets will be understated. Similarly, the ships which are under construction should be recognized in Ships Under Construction Act as work in progress, and the base should be expenditure which the group has to cover plus the interest rate of the loan which was taken to construct the ship. So he's saying that, okay, the work in progress should include the amount which we are spending and the interest amount. There is a risk that if interest on loan was expensed to P&L rather than added to the value of ships under construction, in that case, the profit will be understated and the assets will be understated. So apparently, I will say that this risk is not very well drafted. But still, he has covered everything in a scattered manner. He wrote the standard of IS 23. He calculated, he commented on the materiality. He has repeated some of the things, but still I will say that this will get marks because he has covered everything, but in a scattered manner. Now let's look at the examiner comments. Comment 17. Half mark awarded for calculation of the interest. Comment 18. The candidate is showing the application of materiality. That is good. The marks for materiality has already been given. Note 19, 1 mark awarded for explanation of the correct financial reporting treatment, the borrowing cost treatment, if you read it here. Okay, so the examiner is just skipping his irrelevant comments and he's just picking up the right ones and giving him the marks. Then note 20, this point has been better explained below as this doesn't explain what balances which are affecting PP, because in note 20, he has written it again that the property, plant, and equipment can be understated, and then he has explained it below also. So there was some element of repetition. So examiner did give him credit here, but the credit is given in later part. Then note 21, half mark awarded for identification of risk relating to interest. Okay. Then 1 mark awarded for implication of error on the financial statement. Then point has already been made. He has repeated it that if the interest is expensed out, so again the mark is not given. But if still you read it, which in our opinion was not a well-drafted point, there was a lot of repetition. Okay, there was a lot of scattered data, but still if you look from point number 17, if you look from point 17, half mark plus 1 mark, plus half mark, 2 mark, and plus 1 mark, 3 marks. He got complete 3 marks. Even if your risk is not well structured, then also you got complete. All are the technical marks, because professional skill marks are not necessary that they are given on every point which you have. Okay, he has already got marks of communication earlier. He's already got marks relating to judgment. Okay, so half mark for calculation of interest. Obviously, this is a technical mark. 1 mark awarded for explanation of correct financial treatment. Half mark awarded for identification of risk relating to interest. 1 mark for implication. So complete 3 out of 3 marks were given to him. Complete 3 out of 3 marks were given to him, if you look at it. Now, if you look at the point which we drafted, which in comparison was a very well-drafted point, I would say. As per IS 20, the Crux Group should capitalize its borrowing cost relating to loan it has taken to finance construction of the ship, of Explorer Cruise segment. Construction of ship is taking a period of more than 1 year. Therefore, it is a qualifying asset as per IS 20. Borrowing cost should continue to be capitalized till the point asset becomes available for use for the Crux Group. A risk exists that Crux Group is not capitalizing borrowing cost relating to the loan taken for construction of ships. This will understate its property, plant, and equipment and its profits. Loan taken for construction ships under construction carrying interest of $11.7 million, which exceed the materiality level of Crux Group. Auditors should plan procedures relating to division of borrowing cost of loan for capital projects and borrowing costs relating to normal operations. well crafted, and a concise. Okay. His point was scattered. Still, he got 3 out of 3 marks. Okay. So the most important thing, don't create stress in your examination that, oh, I will write like this, write like, no, no, no. Don't do overthinking. Just start writing. Just start writing. Whatever is in your mind, just write it. Just follow the approach. Correct treatment. Risk, comment on the management. Heads affected. Materiality. Just follow the approach and you'll get the marks. And if you look at the marking guideline, the examiner is just trying and finding those things. That, okay, you wrote the correct treatment. You wrote the impact. You related it to the scenario. You identified the risk. And you're just getting the marks. Is it clear? Let's look at the examiner answer. Again, see, the risk relating to the borrowing cost. Full marks are awarded for it, 3 marks. Okay. Now let's look at the examiner answer relating to borrowing cost. That how much he wrote for it. He wrote borrowing cost later because the examiner considered it to be a less significant risk. But see, I have told you that it is not about ranking all the risk. You just have to rank the starting 2-3 risks, and that is sufficient. Okay. The ships being constructed fall under the definition of qualifying asset under IS 23 borrowing cost, which defines qualifying asset as an asset which takes substantial period of time to get ready for its intended use of sale. This includes property, plant, and equipment during the relevant construction period, which for the ships is 3 years. IS 23 requires that borrowing costs which are directly attributable to the acquisition, construction, or production of a qualifying asset should be capitalized. See, he goes in a lot of technicality. He explains in too much detail, but that is not required in the examination. The audit risk is that interest costs have not been appropriately capitalized and instead have been treated as a finance cost, which would understate assets and profits for them. The amount involved appear to be material. The information does not state precisely that when the loans were taken out and when the construction of ships commenced on when they come into the group on company. So it is not possible to determine exactly the cost of finance that should come in and cease. However, taking loan of $180 million for ships under construction, the interest for the year would be $11.7 million, which is material to it. So it is just about identifying the point properly, explaining it, following the approach, and you are getting it. It is not necessary that you write in too much detail like the examiner or use too much technical comments. Is it clear? Now, if we go further, then there is a point relating to useful life of equipment in the gym. Okay. Financial standard of reporting require that if different parts of tangible asset have different useful lives, they should be depreciated using the required useful life. Equipment in gyms should be replaced after every 3 years. So this part of PP should be depreciated over 3 years, not like the whole ship. Comment number 24, you got complete 1 mark. You explained the correct treatment in a well manner, you got 1 mark. There is a risk that wrong depreciation was used, the same as for the ship, and then the assets and profits will be overstated. 1 mark given for writing the information. 2 marks in just 2.5 units. 2 marks in just 2.5 units. It is not about writing too much. It is about writing relevant. Explaining well, you get it. Is it clear? I hope that you people are understanding what I'm trying to say and you are trying to understand the approach which you have to use in your examination. See, it is very important that you work on your length of answers. It is normal that students miss a lot of marks in the examination because they are not able to complete the paper. They write extra. They don't write well. And as a result, they lose marks. Possible non-adherence to laws and regulation that was relating to cybersecurity. Last month, the group suffered a cybersecurity attack in which personal information of 1,400 customers, including their credit card details, were stolen. There is a risk that group breached a regulation which entered into force recently. There is a risk that the group will have to pay penalties for the breach and that Not all disclosures relating to this event will be contained in the required disclosures. It is possible that management will want to hide this event. If this will be disclosed, the provision for legal claims may be understated. Another risk that the breach may lead to significant decrease of revenue, as potential customers may be afraid of improper use of personal data if the attack happens once again. They may not sure about the issue being resolved. This may cause risk to going concern, and there is a risk that proper disclosures relating to uncertainties relating to going concern are not. So if you remember, we discussed this risk in previous class, that in relation to cybersecurity, there were three risks. One was IS 37 provisioning. Second was impact on the business. It will lead to impairment of assets, and it will lead to going concern issues if the customers are not willing to work with the Crux Group in future. And third is weak controls. Internal auditor and audit committee didn't identify this risk on time. As a result, this incident happened. Note 26, 27, and 28. Okay. 1 mark awarded for identification and explanation of risk relating to non-disclosure of cybersecurity. Half mark for stating provisions may be understated. A full mark would be awarded if the candidate would have explained that expenses will be understated. If the provision is made or if it is wrongly estimated, if you would have explained that well. 1 mark awarded for commercial acumen. The candidate has considered the wider implication on stakeholders of the cybersecurity. This has been appropriate recognition of wider implication on the engagement, the audit firm, and the company. If you remember, we discussed this risk in detail when we were drafting it in the previous class. If you remember the cybersecurity. The cybersecurity attack on the Crux Group consumer data creates a risk relating for its business. The customers may not be willing to do transactions on the Crux Group website in future. This can lead to decline in sales, which can lead to impairment of Crux Group assets. Further implications of IS 37 also needs to be considered, as the Crux Group may face penalty on compromise of the data. It is a breach of a data protection legislation. If any legal notice is issued, then Crux Group should recognize a provision. Failure to recognize provision will overstate profits and understate its provision liability. So if you look at it, he got good marks, he got 1 mark, 1.5 marks in technical and 1 mark for commercial acumen. Okay. Then disclosure of related party, the transactions with Vala Shipbuilder. The group entered into transaction with Vala Shipbuilder Company, which is related party. As the chairman of the group, Max Draco is also the chairman of Vala Shipbuilder Company, and his son is the CEO. So again, you will get a mark because you identified the issue of related party. Then you will discuss the disclosure. Related party transaction is material by nature, should be disclosed in the notes to the FS. The nature of the transaction should be discussed, the value of transaction, and the balance outstanding at the year. Again, 1 mark awarded for identification of correct accounting treatment, that what disclosure is required. Half mark awarded here, full credit obtained by explaining how this should be explained or what the elements should be, which need to be disclosed. There's a risk that Vala Shipbuilder Company was not disclosed as a related party, as the group does not own shares of the company, and the directors may not be aware that transaction with this entity should be related party transaction. The group can say that we need to know about this situation because the Crux Group do not own any shares in Vala Shipbuilder Company. It is the chairman who is also serving there. So unless and until the chairman will disclose himself, the group will not be able to know this. So if you just look at it, such a brief and a very good point he drafted. 1 plus 1 plus half plus 1. The examiner gave him 3.5 marks in this quiz. Okay, because he explained the standard, he explained the treatment. In related party, there were 2 issues. One was identification and one was disclosure. Okay, and then he discussed the licenses of Pioneer Cruises, the impairment issue. The license amount to $56 million, and this is material to FS. Last week, the governments of several countries, which form a major part of Pioneer Cruises itineraries, withdrew their operating licenses with immediate effect. Then the licenses are withdrawn, they should be de-recognized from intangible assets. The value of license decreased by only $1 million, which suggests that licenses were not de-recognized. There is a risk that licenses are overstated and profits are overstated. So you refer the correct treatment, that there should be impairment, there should be de-recognition, the licenses which have been suspended. Then you refer the correct accounting treatment, that what should be done. He analyzed the scenario well, that there is only $1 million decline. If you remember the selected financial information, the intangible assets have only declined by $1 million from 57 to 56, which means that de-recognition and impairment has not been booked. They have just booked the regular amortization. This point would have been further improved if he would have explained IS 36 impairment in big detail, that due to suspension of licenses, the value in use may have declined. Okay. And then, if you go down further, he gave the conclusion. Okay. As this is a new audit line, the increased detection risk due to lack of knowledge and problem errors in opening balances make this risk as significant. Revenue is significant area of risk, as there are indicators that this may not be properly accounted for in accordance with the accounting standard. There are several instances where the company have not adopted the correct accounting treatment, such as treatment of borrowing cost. So particular attention should be paid to areas where management judgment or estimation is used. The audit engagement should focus on testing of key areas to minimize the risk. So if you remember, I told you that this conclusion is required to justify your prioritization. Okay, you can give conclusion at the end of the answer also and after audit risk also. If you remember, we also gave it after the audit risk. We also gave it after the audit risk. It is given to justify your prioritization. If you look at it, he justified that since it is a first year, so first year of audit was a significant risk because there was risk relating to lack of understanding and opening balances. Then he said that revenue is a significant risk because this may not be properly accounted for because they are following wrong treatment. And then he referred the other risk. So 1 mark awarded for analysis and evaluation. Here the candidate has demonstrated the prioritization of the risk and provide a reasoned justification of his choice. See, it is not about prioritizing all the risks. It is about prioritizing few important risks. And 1 mark awarded for professional skepticism. The candidate is challenging the information and focusing on the areas where there may be additional risk. They have focused on areas of subjectivity and estimated that there is a higher risk in audit. Now, if you look at the examiner answer, in examiner answer, he has given conclusion at the end of the answer. Just a second. In examiner answer, see, in examiner answer, the audit risk ended here. Okay. He has given the conclusion after part B and part C at the end. These briefing notes highlight a significant audit risk, including those relating to property, plant and equipment, revenue recognition and disclosure requirement. A number of audit procedures have been recommended in relation to the audit of segment. As mentioned, the provision of additional service should be further discussed. So he gave a conclusion at the end and he gave the significant risk at the end. But the candidate one has also given it after audit risk, and my advice is also that you should give it once you complete the audit risk because the information is fresh in your mind. You can simply refer it at the same time. Okay. Now, if you look at his answer, he has missed out several of the risks. Okay. But then also, if you look at his marking, in part A, he got 21.5 technical marks. 21.5 technical marks. Total technical marks are 25. So he got a very good score. In professional marks, he got 4 plus 3, 7 plus 3, 10, and plus 1. Oh, sorry, 10 plus 1, 11. So he got how many professional marks? 4, 3, 7, 10, and 1, 11. So total professional marks, he got 11. It's a calculation error. It's written 14. He got 11 marks. But there are maximum professional marks 10. So you cannot get more than 10. So he got maximum professional marks. And in part A, he got 21.5 marks. Still, if we compare it with our answer, he missed a lot of risk. Like he wrote a risk on new audit client. He wrote a risk on revenue recognition policy. He wrote a risk on spending on sun-seeker cruises. He wrote a risk on related party. He wrote a risk on capitalization, depreciation. But he didn't wrote a risk on segmental information of onboard sales. That as per IFRS 8, segmental data should be presented for onboard sales. He don't wrote that point. Because I have told you many times that there are extra points in the question. So even if you miss some of the points, then also you can get good marks. Then he didn't perform the financial data analysis, which I recommend that my students should always do. Okay, the trend analysis and then brief comments. Because this trend analysis will get you 0.5 mark each. Okay, if you look at the marking scheme, of the examiner, this marking scheme, in addition, 0.5 mark for relevant trends or calculation which form part of the evaluation of audit risk. Maximum 3 marks. So you can get maximum 3 marks just for calculation. And then revenue and profit trends, when you comment on it, you get additional marks. Like we commented that okay, operating profit of the Crux Group has increased by a much greater percentage as compared to increase in revenue and profit before tax. This creates a risk that some expenses may not have been recorded by the Crux Group, or there may be some misclassification. Then we commented on segmental growth also. Okay, we have discussed this answer in the previous class. Okay, so if anyone feels that, sir, why are you not reading the complete answer? We have already discussed this in the previous class. You can simply refer the previous class recording, which is of 3 hours, in which we have developed this entire answer. Okay, now what you need to understand is, he got 21.5 marks in part A. And if you look at the length of his answer, and then you compare it with the examiner answer. Okay. Just a second. See, he started it from here, audit risk, and his paper size is very small. He's not writing too much on one paper. First page, then the second page on audit risk, and this is not a complete page, it's just a half page of the screen. And then this is the third page where he completed. And then he gave the conclusion. Okay, and he got 21.5 marks for this. Just compare it with the examiner answer, that how much he writes. One complete page, one big page. Second complete big page. Okay, and then half big page. So examiner has written a lot. You are not required to write in that much detail like the examiner. Please make it understand. Okay, make it clear that you are not expected to write in as much detail and as much technicality like the exam. You have to write like this candidate one, brief points, well explained. Compare any point of this candidate one with the examiner answer. Like just look at this license point, license of binary. He just wrote this much, and then look at the examiner answer. Just look at the license point of the examiner. This operating license, and he wrote this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines. And just look at his answer. Half line, 1 line, second line, not a line, and half line. It's like 2 to 3 lines. And he's getting marks. So what you need to understand is that it is not necessary to write too much to get good marks. It is necessary to write relevant, explain it well, apply it well. Okay, are you getting it? Now, before moving towards further requirements, what I'm doing is that now we will refer the same audit risk of candidate 2. And let's see that what were the mistakes that this candidate 2 did. Why he got very less marks. Okay, because if we look at his marking of audit risk, how many marks he got? Just a second. He got only 8.5 marks out of 25. Okay, so why he got very less marks, whereas candidate 1 got 22.5 marks. Okay, 21.5 marks. So what was the difference in the audit risk writing of both of the students? Now let's look at the answer script of candidate 2 for audit risk and try and identify the mistakes which we should avoid in the exam. Okay, so let's look at it. Candidate 2 started his answer with an introduction These briefing notes provide relevant matters to be considered regarding the planning process for the new client, the crux group. So the introduction is very short. He should have referred the hearing and the requirements which he's going to cover in the briefing notes. Further, he has also listed the initial format of the briefing notes, which should start from to, from, subject, date, and then a proper introduction. Okay. Then part A, audit risk evaluation. Materiality is calculated at $8.1 million, which is 10% of profit before tax. So he has followed the instruction of the examiner by using the benchmark of profitability, but he has not calculated the range of materiality, and he also didn't explain the justified materiality level. So let's read the examiner comments. Comment number 3. 0 mark awarded here for communication. There is no use of the briefing notes format and structure. So he has not followed the defined format of to, from, subject, date, and a proper introduction. So he has lost a mark here. Then comment 4, 0 mark awarded here for analysis and evaluation. The candidate does not demonstrate any prioritization of the risk throughout. So when we read the answer, we'll identify that he has not done the prioritization of the risk. Then 1 mark awarded for correct ratio and calculation of upper and lower range for materiality. Out of maximum 3 marks, the candidate has obtained 1 mark for stating the calculated materiality. There is no justification of the choice and no range calculated. So for materiality, since he calculated 10% of PT only, he got 1 mark. But if he would have calculated the complete range, the lower and upper range, 5% to 10% of PBT, and then he would have explained the justified materiality level, he would have got complete marks. So he got only 1 mark here. Now there are 2 comments given at the start also, which are for the overall answer. Comment number 1, 2 marks awarded for communication, for style, language, and clarity, appropriate layout and tone of briefing notes, presentation of materiality, and relevant calculation. So now this is for his overall answer, that he has used the headings and all of that. So he has been awarded 2 marks for communication relating to that. So even though he didn't meet the format of the briefing notes, he lost the marks for it. But in overall answer, he has done good communication. So the examiner has given him 2 marks. And comment number 2, 1 mark awarded for communication. The candidate has followed the instructions, including calculating materiality based on profit before tax. So he has got a mark there also. So if you remember, in question number 1, there are 10 professional skill marks. In those 10 professional skill marks, 4 marks can relate to communication. Out of those 4 marks, he has got 3 marks. 2 marks for overall communication and 1 mark for following the examiner instruction. But he has lost a mark relating to the format of briefing notes. So out of 4 marks of communication, he has got 3 marks. Okay. So if you have not followed any particular thing, you will lose a mark there. But the examiner will give you mark on other heads. Like out of 4 marks of communication, the examiner has given him 3 marks because the examiner is satisfied from his overall communication throughout the answer. And the examiner has given him 1 mark for following the instructions, like following the benchmark of profitability. Okay, but he has lost a mark relating to format of briefing notes. He has lost a mark relating to prioritization of risk. Okay, now let's read each of the audit risk which he has written. Okay, upgradation and maintenance of the Sunseeker cruises. The group will spend $75 million on upgrading and maintenance of the Sunseeker cruise ships. As well as refurbishment, several ships have been enhanced by installation of new entertainment facilities, including cinemas and gyms. Now, see, he's just repeating the data which is already given in the question. The $75 million upgrade represents approximately 4.2% of assets and 92% of PBT. Therefore, it is material for the financial statement. See, there is one more mistake which he's doing. He's not using the materiality level which he himself calculated. He's calculating the materiality levels again during the question. So this is not an advisable approach. Advisable is that you should use the materiality level which you calculated at the start of the question. Okay. Therefore, it is material for financial statement. If the management will account for these upgrades as in addition to property, plant, and equipment, there is risk that not all of the additions would meet the capitalization requirement. That means that both property, plant, and equipment line item and profit before tax might be overstated. Also, there is a risk of inappropriate depreciation rate used for new equipment facility, including cinemas and gyms. Equipments in gym will need to be replaced on average every 3 years, and so considering the economic useful relevant depreciation rates shall be considered in this matter. So he has some good points, but there are some subjectivity issues. Like he didn't refer the maintenance outflows specifically. He has merged the risk of depreciation with the capitalization risk. But still, he will get some marks here. Let's look at it, but obviously not the complete credit. Comment number 6. 0 marks. The candidate has recognized that the balance is material. However, they are not referring the stated materiality level they have just calculated. Like he's calculating the materiality levels again here. He's not referring the materiality which he himself calculated. Okay. Then half mark awarded for identification of the risk. Explanation half mark is given below because he identified the risk that there is a risk of wrong capitalization. 1 mark for identification of the impact of the error on the financial statement, like he stated that the property, plant, and equipment and profits will be overstated. 1 mark awarded for professional skepticism and judgment. The candidate has effectively challenged the information supplied and techniques carried out to support the facts. Like he has questioned the data that the management may have wrongly capitalized the outflows. Half mark awarded for identification of the correct accounting treatment relating to the depreciation. So how many marks he has got? He got half mark for identification, then 1 mark for explaining the impact. This 1 mark is a professional skill mark, and then he got a half mark. So half and half, 1, and this one, 2 marks. So these 2 marks are good or bad? I will say that this is not a good score because he has merged 2 risks here. He has merged the risk of capitalization and depreciation both. And by merging them, it should be 6 marks, and he only got 2 marks in it. See, it is very important that you explain each risk separately. Many students ask this, that, sir, if we merge the risk, will we get a complete credit? So you can get a complete credit if you explain it well. But when the students merge the risk, they don't explain well. Like if you look at it, he started the risk of depreciation, that there is a risk that they may use the wrong rates. He said that the gym equipment should be depreciated at 3 years. But then he didn't comment it on the impact that the profits and property, plant, and equipment will be misstated. He didn't comment it on the impact because he must have thought that I have already explained the impact above. See, what happened is that when you merge the risk, you don't complete the content of the risk, that you have to write the correct treatment, then you have to comment on the management, then you have to write the impact on FS. So he has got a credit, but there were few mistakes. He has not used the materiality level, which he himself calculated above. He calculated the materiality again. Then he identified the risk relating to capitalization. He explained it well. He gave its impact. But in relation to depreciation, he didn't completed the content. Okay. Now let's read further. Acquisition, recognition of new ships, explorer cruises, related party considerations. The new ships with a total cost of $110 million will come into use. The ships were constructed by Vala Shipbuilder Company, which is not owned by the group. However, the chairman of the group, Max Draco, is also the chairman of Vala Shipbuilder Company, and his son is the company's chief executive officer. A further 3 ships are currently under construction by Vala Shipbuilder Company. Apart from quantitative aspect of the above information and its significant impact on FS, from the perspective of the statement of the financial position, $110 million acquisition represent approximately 6% of total assets and therefore material to FS. See, again, he is not using the materiality level which he himself has calculated. The related party transactions are considered very important to the financial statement from the qualitative information. The mentioned transaction represents the related party transaction, and there is a risk of not sufficient disclosures. Also, the audit team consider the other aspect of these transactions in their planning, such as evaluation of the appropriateness, arm's length rule of the transaction terms, example transaction price. The audit team shall also consider requesting relevant representation from the management as supporting audit evidence in this matter. So he has developed a point relating to related party. He has identified the fact that, okay, it's a related party transaction, okay, but he has commented too much on responses. And similarly, when writing the materiality thing, he has calculated the materiality level again. Let's read the examiner comments. 0 marks awarded here. To keep any recap, material brief and to the point. That he has not referred the materiality which he himself calculated. 0 mark awarded. Materiality should refer to the basis stated by the partner. That is PBT. He has calculated the materiality based on assets that it is 6% of assets. So he's not following the guideline of the exam. 1 mark awarded for identification of the risk and brief explanation of the risk. So from the financial statement perspective, he only got 1 mark. So he has written a lot about what the auditor should do rather than referring the risk in detail. The response should be written, but that should be very brief. But he has written a lot about response and very less about the risk. He should have stated that notes to the financial statement will be misstated. He should have referred that Max Draco is the key management personnel. That's why he's the related party. He should have referred the issue of close family member. He only identified that his son is a CEO and Max Draco is a chairman, but he didn't refer the specific wordings of IS 24, related party, that key management personnel, close family member, but still he got 1 mark relating to standard. Now, notes payable, loan taking, recognition and accounting of Explorer cruises. Okay, now, I hope that you all have printed out this document because the font size is very small because I have to read the answer and the comment. So that's why we have to read on a very small font size. If you'll take a print out of the document, you can read with it parallel while I'm referring them. Now, the purchase of ships was financed through a $110 million loan with a fixed interest rate of 6% per annum. A further 3 ships are currently under construction by Vala Shipbuilder Company. The group has taken out a loan of $180 million with a 6.5% fixed interest rate. See, the major problem in his answer is that he keeps on repeating the data of the question. He is not writing the risk that what is the issue. There are several risks relating to these loans. The audit team shall consider relevant aspects of detailed key characteristics. If the assets are contingent, mortgaged, if any financial covenants apply to the loan, and plan relevant audit procedures in order to get desirable level of assurance. The loan jointly represents 15% of the assets that is material. There's a risk that inappropriate accounting is applied. 0 marks. 0 marks. Because he's writing just useless comments. He should have referred simply to IS 23 borrowing cost. 0 marks awarded here. The candidate should have calculated the potential interest on this amount to assess materiality and impact of any loan. 0 marks, he has just explained general things that the audit team should consider that whether the loan is significant, contingent, mortgages. Basically, he don't remember the rules of IS 23 and he's just wasting the time. So 0 marks point. Okay, I hope you all remember that we wrote a very good risk relating to it, and that was a point relating to borrowing cost. Okay, So it is very important that the student has good information of the accounting standard. Okay. So here you can clearly identify that this candidate too didn't remember IS 23 rules. Okay, let's move forward. Now, revenue recognition from ticket sales. See, you can identify that he's not done the prioritization of risk because this revenue recognition should be written first. Revenue includes passenger ticket sales, which accounts for approximately 85% of the revenue. He again keeps on repeating the question simply. He don't have an idea that how he has to draft the risk. When customer book a cruise, they are required to pay a refundable 20% deposit, which is initially recognized as deferred revenue. The balance 80% is paid at least 6 weeks before the cruise commences. And at that point also it is recognized as deferred revenue. The full amount of ticket price is transferred to the revenue when the cruise starts, irrespective of the duration of the cruise. He has just written 3 lines and he's repeating the question. It's useless, 0 mark. Okay, now let's see if it's written any relevant. With the deferred payment that the customers are obliged to pay in advance, there's a risk of revenue recognition time. Based on relevant accounting standard, International Financial Reporting Standard, IFRS 15, dealing with matters relating to the revenue shall be recognized only if the performance obligation have been fulfilled. In this case, revenue might be recognized too early, that is when the customers pay their deposit. It is clearly written in the question that they are recognizing deposit as the deferred revenue. Why are you commenting on deposit thing? The risk might be significant considering the fact that management might only monitor closely as it does with regard to the less substantial revenue stream on board sales. So he's missed the main point that they have to spread the revenue of the ticket sales over the period of the trip. Okay, let's read that how many marks the examiner has given, but obviously we know that he has not obtained a good credit. 1 mark awarded for identification of risk and explaining the financial reporting treatment. 0 mark awarded, the candidate has stated to make an attempt at prioritization of risk, but with little justification and explanation is unclear. So this was a good point of 3 marks, but he only got 1 mark, because he just explained IFRS 15 rules slightly, but he has failed to pick up the main point that the revenue has to be spread over the duration of the trip. He just wasted his time in repeating the question information. And he identified a risk that maybe the company will recognize the revenue of deposits. It was clearly written in the question that deposits were recognized as deferred revenue. So again, a very weak. In my opinion, this student didn't have proper knowledge of accounting standards. Okay. Pioneer cruises, itineraries, withdrawals of operating license. Last week, the governments of several countries which form major part of Pioneer cruises, itineraries, withdraw their operating licenses with immediate effect. Again, he keeps on repeating the question. The governments have stated that this is likely to be a temporary measure being put in place to limit the number of tourist areas of national beauty, but they will not confirm when the group can resume operations. Again, he wasted 2.5 hours. There's a risk that impairment of intangible asset as they might no longer be economically useful. Based on the relevant standard, that is International Accounting Standard 36, if relevant factors are met that could indicate, example, the asset might no longer be used, the entity should perform relevant tests to perform if there is any impairment recognition requirement. It seems like withdrawal of operating license is event triggering the need for impairment. Therefore, the assets might be overstated. So he has identified the risk of impairment. He has explained it, and he has explained the partial impact on FS that assets might be overstated. But still, he is wasting a lot of time in repeating the question. 0 mark here. Do keep recap elements as brief as possible. He's just repeating the question. The examiner is saying that just refer the question briefly. I already have the question. Why are you repeating it again and again? 1 mark awarded for identification of risk and explaining the financial reporting treatment. He explained IS 36. Half mark awarded for identification of the indicator from the scenario triggering the risk. half mark awarded for identification of the impact on misstatement. Only half of the double entry identified as half, hence half mark. Because he only stated that assets will be overstated. He should have also referred that profits will also be overstated. Okay. Then cybersecurity attack. Last month, the group suffered a cybersecurity attack in which the personal information of 1,400 customers, including their credit card details, were stolen. According to the representative of Group Audit Committee, the group internal audit team has not performed the risk relating to cybersecurity. Again, repeating the question, wasting the time, which is requirement of recently introduced data protection legislation in the jurisdiction in which the group operates. The issue which led to cybersecurity attack has now been resolved. 2.5 lines wasted on just repeating the question. There are several risks that the group can face. The customers might sue the group due to their personal data being lost. That is, there could be need for providing relevant provisions considering the relevant IS and IFRS requirement. That is, event of the past that can end up negative cash flows outcome in the future. There is also a risk that group can face a penalty since data protection legislation in the jurisdiction in which the group operates has been breached. So he has explained the risk very slightly, but again, he is keep on repeating the data again and again. 0 mark awarded here. Do keep recap elements as brief as possible. The examiner is saying again and again. This will save time, enabling the focus to do on adding value by explaining the impact, potential understatement of expenses due to fine, implications of disclosure, impact on operating licenses from breach of rules, but he's just keeping on repeating the question information. 1 mark awarded for identification of risk in the scenario and the potential implication for financial report. 1 mark awarded for identification of risk and the reason relevant to the scenario. So he's explained the cybersecurity attack, but he has kept it brief. Otherwise, he would have got 3 marks also if he would have referred IS 37 in more detail. So if we look at the answer of this candidate group, it is a weak answer overall. He has not done prioritization. He has missed several risks. Okay, like he only risked 1, 2, 3, and he referred only 4, 5, and 6 risks. There were many other risks, like he can refer the financial data analysis. In cybersecurity attack, also he can refer the governance issue. Okay, then he missed the point relating to segmental revenue of onboard sales. So he has missed many risks also. So in part A, how many marks he got if we look at it? If we look at it, his marking of part A, he only get 8.5 marks, which is obviously a very less score. Okay, in part A was a 25 marks requirement relating to audit risk. We looked at our answer, we looked at the candidate 1 answer, we looked at examiner answer, and then we analyzed the answer of candidate 2. See, the purpose of today's class is to give you an understanding that how you have to write your answer, how you have to understand the examiner's marking approach, what should be the reasonable length. Okay, you shouldn't be repeating the question data. Okay, now let's look at other requirements also in the question. Now I'm going back to the candidate 1 answer. Okay, because we first read the candidate 1 answer, then we come back and we look at the examiner answer, the answer we develop, and also at the candidate 2 answer. Okay, now part B is relating to principal audit procedures. Okay, if you remember, let's go back to the scenario and refer. Design the principal audit procedures to be performed on segmental information relating to the group revenue. 5 marks. So 5 audit procedures were required in part B. If you remember, we wrote them in the previous class. I told you people that when you have to write audit procedures, okay, the simple approach is just think about the accounting standard in your mind. So it was segmental information. Okay, if you remember in selected financial information, the segmental information was given about Sunseeker Cruises, Explorer Cruises, and Pioneer Cruises. There was an issue that onboard sales were not reported as a segment. So I told you while we were discussing the answer in the previous class that whenever you have to write the procedures, Just think about the correct accounting treatment. As per IFRS 8, there are three issues which you need to consider. Number one, what is a segment? Two requirements. A chief operating officer and separate financial information should be available. That makes an operation a segment. Reportable segment, 10% of revenue, 10% of PBT, or 10% of assets. Number third, what should be disclosed? Its revenues, its profits, and its assets should be reported separately. Okay, let's look at that how candidate one developed answer. Okay, principal audit procedures to be performed on segmental information relating to group revenue. Okay, so we'll read the comments also. Now he gave a proper heading, so 1 mark, just a second. 1 mark awarded for communication. All procedures in this section are identified and explained and why they are to be carried out. This would gain a mark on communicate. Now, inspect a copy of reports which management used to perform analysis and evaluation, the results of the group to confirm that main segments are recognized by the manager. So he has identified that how the segment is identified. Okay, that we have to look the data which the management is using to determine that whether segments are real or not, whether separate financial information is available or not. Discuss with the management how they evaluate the segments, what do they take into account when assessing the results of the segment to confirm that copy of reports obtained are in line with what the management sees. Again, 1 mark was awarded. Calculate the percentage of revenue of each segment of total revenue to confirm each segment brings 10% of revenue to the group. So he has checked the requirement of reportable segment and calculate the percentage of external revenue which all segments bring to the group, that at least 75% of the external revenue is shown in separate segments. If you know, as per IFRS 8, it is a requirement that at least 75% of the revenue of the company should be reported in segmental form. So he has written 4 procedures, so you got 4 marks. Okay, 1 mark was on professional skill. For technical marks, he'll get 4 marks. But if you read at the procedures, he has simply focused them on IFRS 8. So whenever you have to write procedures, the simple approach is to think about the accounting standard. So he has developed the procedure 1 on what the segment is, that whether the management is making sure that separate financial information is available for each segment. Then in procedure 2, he said that we look at the management reports and we'll confirm that whether the data reported in FS matches with the internal reporting. Then he said that we'll check that whether the 10% criteria of reportable segment is satisfied. And then he stated that we'll check that external revenues, 75% portion is reported in form of segments, which is a requirement of IFRS 8. So he got simple 4 marks. If you remember, we developed this procedure thing also. We also focused it on IFRS 8. Discussion should be done with management about the organizational structure of the Crux Group, that whether chief operating officer exists on every segment. So the candidate A didn't wrote this to us. There's this procedure, but we referred it. So will it be right? We referred about chief operating officer. Just go to the examiner's marking scheme, okay? And you can find the relevant procedures here, okay? That review the financial report sent to the highest level of management to confirm the basis of segment which is reported. Candidate A referred this point. Review the group's organizational structure to confirm identity of the chief operating decision maker, that whether chief operating officer exists. Discuss with management the means by which segmental information is reviewed by the chief operating officer. Review board minutes to see that segmental information is subject to regular review. So you can refer the marking scheme while you are reviewing your procedures. Discussion with management should be done on level of financial information available for each segment. It needs to be verified that whether sufficient financial information exists for each segment as it is reviewed by Chief Operating Officer. So we identified 2 procedures on what the segment is. Then we referred on reportable segment. Discuss with management that why onboard sales are not reported as a segment, despite that it meets the 10% criteria. Breakup of revenue, profits, and assets need to be evaluated that whether any other segment exists which meets the criteria. Review the breakup of the revenue of Crux Group to verify that revenue is properly reported for all reportable segments. Okay, so you can refer that all the procedures we have written are part of marking scheme. Okay, discuss with management that whether onboard sales should be reported separately. Obtain breakdown of revenue to confirm that revenue has been appropriately allocated. Perform analytical procedures to determine the trends for each segment and discuss unusual patterns. Recalculate the revenue totals from date breakdown to confirm that they are reportable segments. So 1 mark for each procedure. Examples are provided below. Marks will be awarded for other relevant points also. Okay. So candidate 1 has attempted it well, but he should have included one extra procedure here. So if we look at it, he got complete 4 marks here. Now let's look at candidate 2. How many marks he got in audit procedures? And then we'll read his answer. Now we are going for candidate 2. Okay. He got only 0.5 marks out of 5 marks. Just look at that, what he has done in procedure thing. Let's look at it. Now, principal audit procedures. Review non-current asset register and analyze what assets relate to 3 separate brands. See, he has not explained the reason of the procedure. Why you want to look? Why you want to look at the assets? So he should have explained it that as it is required to be disclosed. Speak to the management to obtain more information how the revenue is booked, to understand how the system works, to be able to verify the revenue is booked correctly to the appropriate brand. Wrong, irrelevant, and subjective procedure. Take a sample of bookings and reconcile them to bank statement. Request the license and verify if the licenses are correctly allocated to appropriate brand. Agree non-current asset register. He's just writing general procedures. He has no clarity that he has to focus procedures on segmental information only. Okay. Agree the non-current asset register net book value to the calculation included in the financial statement to make sure that 2 sources show the same information. Irrelevant and useless procedures. Request information in relation to the bank. Do the brands have separate bank accounts and how the transactions are correctly transacted in between the brands? Again, he's just writing useless information. Request detail of the person who prepared the financial information to verify qualification and competence. Speak to the management regarding booking the revenue and request a list of cancellation. Discuss with management for working of financial reporting key assumptions. Prepare sensitivity analysis to show how it would impact forecasted the key assumption matter. Request a report from shipbuilder company to confirm the number of ships under construction. So some irrelevant procedures which he has written. Okay. So 0 marks awarded. 0 marks awarded here. Okay. The candidate did not provide appropriate audit procedures for the assessment of segmental information. His audit procedures were simply general. He didn't read the question instruction clearly that he has to focus the procedures on segmental information only. 1 mark awarded for relevant procedure and reason for it being reviewed. Like he referred that we should look at the shipbuilder company and confirm the number of ships under construction because this was need to be reported in Explorer Cruises segment. But still, this was just a credit the examiner gave him. The procedures were still not relevant to what was asked in the question. So it is very easy to write procedures. If you know the relevant standard, write procedures on segmental information. It's very simple. Just click IFRS 8 folder in your mind. IFRS 8 is divided in 3 portions. What is a segment? What is a reportable segment? And what needs to be disclosed? What is a segment? What is a reportable segment? And what needs to be disclosed? Just focus the procedures on that and you'll get marks. He just focused the general procedures that look at non-current asset register, bank account, and general things. Okay, so he didn't get good marks. And I always say that procedure is an easy mark if you read the requirement well and you write them in a proper approach. What you are verifying and why is it necessary to verify? What and purpose? What and purpose? What you are verifying and why The purpose. Why is it necessary to verify? Okay, what's the purpose? What is the reason of that procedure? Okay, like, okay, I'm verifying, I'm discussing with the management about chief operating officer. Why? Because it is a requirement of IFRS. You should explain the reason, the purpose of the procedure. Okay, so he got only 0.5 marks, the candidate 2, not a good answer. But candidate 1 got good marks, he got 4 marks, that was a good thing. Okay. Now let's look at the last part. The matters to be considered in deciding whether Pegasus and company should accept the engagement to provide advice on both social and environmental information. Okay. The last part, if you remember, 10 marks. Evaluate the matters to be considered in whether Pegasus and company should accept the engagement to provide advice on the group's social and environmental information. 10 marks. The requirement relating to ethics, if you remember. Okay. That whether the group should accept the engagement of accepting to provide guidance on social and environmental information. So if you remember, we discussed this part in a lot of detail in previous class. It was a 10 marks requirement in which we have to refer 10 points. Okay. But I told you that this was a bit difficult to get complete 10 marks because a very small paragraph was leading us to 10 marks. That audit committee was putting time pressure that the deadline is very near. And then they were asking us to do the management work on how to measure. Then there was self-review threat issues. They were offering enhanced fees. There was self-interest issue. Okay, if you remember. Again, we are just reviewing the question and referring the answers. If you want to understand the complete question and the detailed analysis, you have to watch the previous class, and we did that. We did a 3-hour session on this question 1. So if anyone want to analyze this question in detail, you should watch the previous class recording. The objective of today's class is just to understand the marking approach. Okay. Now the matters to be considered in whether Pegasus and company should accept the engagement. Okay. Advice on the group social and environmental information acceptance consideration. We need to consider following factors. Social and environmental reporting is required by new regulation. We may lack expertise in this area as auditors, professional competence in due care, and may also increase cost. So he identified a good point that, okay, we may lack competence. That was a reasonable point. Work is urgent, so there will be time pressure. There is an audit ahead, which puts another strain on our availability, resourcing issue. The risk needs to be considered. So this is also a right point that we need to consider deadline. See, just look at it. How brief he's writing and he's getting 1 1. Just look at it. 1 line, 1 mark. And we in fact wrote extra. Like on the deadline issue, if you remember, the deadline point, yes, here. We wrote around 2.5 points that we need to consider about the deadline. But he's just writing a 1 line. And he's getting 1 mark. So for those students, just go and compare with the examiner answer. Just look at the examiner answer on this deadline issue. Okay. Just look at the point. The examiner's answer. It starts from here, additional service, and then it goes on and on and on. Okay. Now, if I look at the point of the examiner on deadline, if we just find out, yes, the group needs the work to be carried out to a tight deadline, which could impact the scope and extent of the procedure which the firm can carry out, also impacting the quality of the work and risk of the engagement. The pressure to perform work quickly within the next one could be viewed as intimidation. He wrote 3 lines like us. But look at the candidate 1 answer. He got complete 1 mark. See, it's 1 mark for each point. You cannot get more points, more marks if you write extra. If you look at the marking scheme. Okay, it was 1 mark for each relevant point. So he has got maximum point by writing this 1 line. I'm not talking about his entire answer. I'm talking about this 1 point. On this 1 point, he got maximum marks. Then there's a self-review threat because the audit, we will most likely need social and environmental information to check for consistency with financial statement. Half mark awarded as ethical risks are identified but not explained. He should have explained the self-review thread more, so he would have get extra mark that we will not be able to audit independently in like that. Enhanced fees is another factor to be considered. We may be fees dependent on the client that triggers self-interest and intimidation risk. Here also, he didn't explain the self-interest and intimidation in detail. But then also he got 1 mark. The candidate has recognized that there are limitations to what non-assurance services may be provided and explained that it is unlikely that due to such engagements, the engagement could be accepted. Okay. Then the group is listed entity. So the extent of non-audit services which can be provided is limited. I have serious doubt if this job could be done. Okay. So he has been a credit on it. Now, basically, the examiners, I think, they switched the comment 46 and 47. This 46 is for 47, which he has stated that he has identified that what non-assurance services can be provided and which are limited. Comment 2 week for credit needs to be specific understanding of what candidate cannot be allowed, and candidate has not decided whether the service can be performed. Finally, however, the accepting this work, we may be seen as assuming the management responsibility in that area, which is prohibited by ACC's code of conduct, and there are no safeguards to eliminate this risk. So he explained this risk well. Conclusion, in my view, we should not accept the engagement. We should politely decline. So he referred the action relating to it. Okay. Now he has given the conclusion again also. The crux group brings a number of significant audit risks. Proper audit procedures should be planned and decrease the risk to an acceptable level. Sufficiency and sufficiently experienced staff should be assigned to audit. See, the overall conclusion is not mandatory. The conclusion was only required for explaining the prioritization of risk. I have explained this earlier in the today's class, so read this comment. This overall conclusion scores no credit as the prioritization of risk has been explained at the end of part A. Okay. A second conclusion is not required at the end of overall response. A conclusion explaining the prioritization can appear anywhere in the response after part A, B, or at the end of the briefing. So I have already explained this issue earlier also. So if we look at his matters to consider answer, he got good marks, but he has failed to identify sufficient points. Like he only identified 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 points. In those 7 points also, few of them were incomplete. Okay. But still, his answer was a good guideline to understand that how much we have to run. So in part C, he got 5 marks out of 10 because he failed to identify sufficient points. Okay. If you remember our answer, we identified multiple points. Okay. Like he also identified this point relating to management responsibility, that we shouldn't be accepting management responsibility. Then if you remember, he failed to identify this issue of self-review in relation to charitable donation, that they will also become part of FS. Okay. He identifies self-review from the perspective of other information. We also wrote this point. Then for enhanced fees, self-interest, he didn't explain it well. He identified that there will be fees dependency, but he didn't explain self-interest issue in detail. Then competence issue was also explained by him, if you remember, but he got a very easy mark by writing so brief, if you remember, that it is required by new regulation, we need to look at competence. And he was awarded 1 mark for it. We also wrote this point. Then we referred the scope of engagement, since it's a new regulatory requirement, he didn't identify this point. He also identified this point of listed entity, he got a credit on it. Then he failed to identify the actions like use of separate key. Okay. Then deadline issue was also identified by him. Okay. And then he also failed to identify that we need to discuss with the audit committee. Okay. So if you look at the marking guidelines, all of the points are written here also. What you need to make sure is that you are covering the marking scheme. Sir, how will we predict that what is included in the marking scheme? See, this is practice. With practice, you will gain an understanding about the examiner's thinking approach. Okay. So if you look at the answer of candidate 1, he scored well, but he should have included more points. Whatever he has written, he got good marks. Like the 7 points he wrote, he got 5 marks in that. That is a good score. But if he would have added more points, obviously he would have scored additional marks. Okay. Now let's look at the answer of candidate 2. How many marks candidate 2 has obtained in it? Now candidate 2 has obtained only 3.5 marks. Okay. Let's look at his answer. Okay. Now candidate 2 has given a lot of headings. But what I believe is that he must have written some general comments. Matters to be considered: social and environmental information, advice, engagement, acceptance, ethical consideration. The Crux Group is not a listed entity. He has written it wrong. Maybe he has missed the information that it was clearly written in the question that Crux Group is a listed entity. If you remember the introduction, okay. The Crux Group, which is a financial year end of 30th September, is a listed entity. So he has done a mistake, and we are not prohibited from carrying on additional work. However, we need to consider other ethical threats like familiarity, which may not be a problem yet, as it is a new client, but also the firm need to consider if there is no other personal or financial relationship. So this was a completely wrong point, so no credit was given for it. Resources: do we have competent and experienced people to carry out work in relation to social and environmental work? It appears the sector is quite regulated, and we may not know the laws in relation to the sector. Additionally, the Crux Group deal with governments in foreign countries. Do we have knowledge relating to legislation and environmental laws in those countries? Will we have enough staff to complete the engagement? Again, the point is misguided. Okay, it was never referred as a point relating to foreign countries. It was simply written that social and environment, which is required to be published on the group website, and this is required by new regulation in the industry and is required to be submitted by regulatory authority. So it was never written that it is some requirement relating to other countries, like foreign countries. So again, the answer was misguided and it was very much general. Scope of the report: what would need to be reviewed as a scope of the report, what we'll need to analyze for this engagement. Is this data publicly available? Again, he's misguided. It is clearly written that it is to be published on the website. So it is publicly available. So highlighting that issue, it apparently appears that he has not read the question and he's not relating his answer well. Would it be available locally, or do we have to also verify it from abroad? There's an issue with language as well. Will the data be available in the firm employee language? So some useless information, useless. Content of the report: the firm need to find out what would be the content of the report. Is Crux Group looking for any sort of assurance in relation to engagement? Users of the report: we need to know who the report is directed to. If the information required for license or bank loan, the audience of the report is limited or general. This will affect the work, as we need to be aware that who will rely. So again, the examiner is giving him a 1 mark, but still his mark points are not very good. Okay, so he was awarded to overall 3.5 marks. The technical marks gained by the candidate raising relevant issue. However, there was little development of the point speed. Candidate often asked the question rather than providing a solution or providing guidance. So time frame: what is the timeline of the data? They will have huge impact on the decision. We need to know the amount of the work, and data need to be analyzed for the engagement to be able to have the number of staff to available to complete on it. 1 mark awarded for identification of the issue of timeline, because the question stated that they have asked the report urgently. Commercial reality: the audit firm need to know how many hours it will take on this engagement, as at the end of the day, the firm need to generate its income. And it is important that cost is analyzed to see that the firm will generate profit from this work. So he may get a mark for commercial acumen here. 1 mark for identification and some explanation. 1 mark awarded for commercial acumen. But overall, if we look at his answer, he has been given lesser marks because he apply his points to the question. Like if you read his answer, he's just using general comments. Management integrity is a big factor. There may be, they may use this report to obtain the license or get some tax reduction, and it may be incentive for them that the things look better than they are. Therefore, we need to consider, is it possible to manipulate the data? Again, some general comments. So if you look at his entire answer, there are lots of general comments. Like this integrity issue has no relation with the question. Okay. The points which gained credit was this timeline point, this commercial acumen point. Okay. But that was also general. On use of the report, also the examiner gave him credit. But on overall, he only got 3.5 marks in technical perspective. Then he wrote a summary, a conclusion. Several audit risks were identified and evaluated, which should be considered during the audit. The briefing notes also provide the proposed audit procedures with respect to segmental information, with respect to additional service requested by group audit committee. It might not be appropriate to accept the engagement, considering mostly the potential lack of specific knowledge and stating the requirement is short. Finally, the briefing notes include how data analytics can bring benefits. That data analytics requirement is now being removed. Now, if we look at his conclusion, he has written a conclusion, but the objective of conclusion, please remember, the objective of conclusion was to justify prioritization of risk. He has not justified the prioritization issue. Okay, so 0 marks awarded here. The conclusion is repeat of earlier comments with no development or highlighting the significance of this. Okay, so conclusion was required for prioritization justification. So he has not done that. Now, if we read, he only got 3.5 marks in parts. The examiner has provided us the comments also that how he can improve the answer. So we have discussed all of this while we were discussing the answer. So if we sum up the today's class provides us a very good insight on what we should do and what we should avoid. Okay, the candidate 1 answer was a good answer. He scored 40.5 marks. Candidate 2 only got 18.5 marks. We have tried and understood that what we should be doing in the examination, how much we have to write, what is the reasonable length. We analyzed the answer which we developed in the previous class. We looked at the examiner answer. We looked at the marking scheme. Okay. Now, what you should be doing, you should print out this document. You should read this entire document again. You can read the comments that how this answer can be improved. It's a very good document. See, this read the mind of marker document is not provided for all exam pass papers. This is only issued for this specimen paper. So you should gain maximum benefit of it. Okay. We are having a series of past paper discussion sessions. We have only completed question number 1 till now. We had a discussion in the previous class on question number 1. We discussed read the mind of marker of it. Now in the next class, we'll discuss question 2, then read the mind of marker of that. Then question 3, read the mind of marker of that. Then we'll do few more past papers. We will do at least 5 past papers together. Okay. And then I will give you few mock exams to do on your own and then send me for marking and feedback. Okay. See, this is maximum I can do for my enrolled students. Those students who enroll with me, we have studied the entire course, and now we are looking at professional skill marks and we are doing complete past paper sessions. Okay, we'll do 5 past papers together. I want you to do these past papers with me. Look how I draft the answer, and then I will give you the mock exams which you have to do on your own. Okay, if you have any queries, feel free to ask me on my WhatsApp. Okay, thank you everyone.